It's a new day on planet Marva 4, and Cisco's here looking for information on a certain Mr. Eddington, a former Starfleet officer turned very naughty boy. The informant he expected to find isn't here, but Eddington himself is, after marooning the lad in question on another planet to die slowly, this being his idea of justice, apparently. We briefly cover the events to date by looking out at the refugees from a former Federation colony handed over to the Cardigans as part of a ceasefire deal, a deal with which the Marquis take issue and the reason Eddington buggered off. Debating morals ends with Eddington teleporting away after a warning not to follow, one which we obviously ignore. We move to pursue the ship he's scarpering in, but it's almost as fast as us and will be in the Badlands before we catch it. That means calling for an assist and debuting a new toy just installed by O'Brien. The holographic communicator means whoever you're talking to will appear on the bridge, which raises a whole lot of logistical questions that we're just going to ignore. Our call is to the captain of a nearby Starfleet ship to help us intercept Eddington, so let's bring out the wheel of names and decide what we're going to call him. Our new captain will be known as... Charlie Cannon Fodder, provided by Lieutenant James Baker. Captain Charlie Cannon Fodder agrees to get ahead of Eddington to stop him, and also let Cisco be the one to collar him. Or not, as Eddington stops ahead of time and turns around. Cisco's in a shoot-first kind of mood, which is unfortunate as everything switches off when he tries. Everything except the holographic phone, as Eddington gives us a call, him apparently having nicked one for himself. Are we going to ignore the questions raised by that too? Why, yes we are. Anywho, Eddington says our computers are buggered and will remain so until they've been completely reinstalled, all courtesy of a virus he left in it prior to buggering off. Oh, and he poops yellow at us a bit just to make his point before he scarpers. Captain Charlie Cannon Fodder's close enough to give us all a tow back to DS9, which is just as well as O'Brien says it'll take a couple of weeks to get everything running properly again. Odo's checked the station's computers and found similar gifts from Eddington, which at least gives him the chance to stick the boot in about Eddington being Starfleet's idea of a trustworthy replacement for him. Fair play, son. We've also had word of 2 ships being nicked near the Badlands, though they were just carrying large quantities of relatively basic chemicals. Worf says Dax is looking at what they could make. Not that it'll matter to us. Captain Charlie Cannon Fodder has news from Starfleet, and it's not good. Long story short, Cisco hasn't got the job of catching Eddington done, so he's being taken off it, and they're giving Captain Charlie a chance instead. Cisco's not chuffed about it, but based on what just happened, maybe they've got a point. Cisco's in a holosuite, battering a punching bag with Dax. She tries to improve his mood, but there's no point. He's too busy being pissed off that he was beaten, and by a bog-standard human like himself instead of the hundreds of examples of weird shit he's seen over the years. A call from Kira brings him to Ops, where we have more bad news. We know what those stolen chemicals were for now, as Eddington's just farted some toxins into the atmosphere of a Cardigan colony in the demilitarized zone. It's deadly to them, but not to humans, and he sent out a message saying the Marquis claimed the planet now. Worse is that he's got enough chemicals to do the same to every Cardigan colony in the area, and Captain Charlie Cannon Fodder is on the other side of the Badlands, so can't get to this colony in time to track Eddington. Worse again is that there aren't any other ships in range. Well, unless you count the Defiant, anyway. It's fair to say the Defiant is a bit on the bollocks side, but Cisco wants to go anyway. It'll be slower, with weapons that have to be aimed manually, and the internal phone lines are buggered too. Their badges won't work either because of science bollocks, but O'Brien's thought of a solution. Well, sort of. Most chatter inside the ship is between the bridge and engineering, especially now a lot of the bridge controls are shafted, so we're going to use eggnog to relay messages. There's no similar fix for all the other stuff that's broken sadly, and O'Brien adds that sneaky bastard mode and teleporters can go on the list as well. In fact, the only thing that's running properly is the new holographic phone. It's a shame we don't have another one down in engineering. At least Eggnog isn't forced to run between the bridge and engineering, instead using a different communicator. Why does that one work when the badges don't? Because reasons. It's a bit of a rough start when we nearly crash into the station, but we get going in the end and arrive at the Badlands, presumably to search near the colony Eddington poisoned. We pick up a signal shortly afterwards, something Kira identifies as a marquee ship. We also get a holo call on the way there from Eddington himself. He's having a bit of a gloat by sending over a copy of Les Miserables and comparing Sisko to the copper in it who spends 20 years obsessing over someone who stole bread. He can afford to gloat as the signal isn't a ship, but rather a probe, one Sisko assumes was meant to pull them in while Eddington went off to do bad shit elsewhere. Perhaps that's connected with Captain Charlie Cannon Fodder, as his ship's been attacked by the Marquis. We turn up to find he's all kinds of knackered, the victim of an ambush with a faked signal, much like the one we tracked. On the plus side, they managed to intercept a message during the fight, though they can't decode it because of the damage to their ship. Sisko leaves Captain Charlie Cannon Fodder with the gubbins to effect repairs and turns around to track Eddington once more. We sent the encoded message to Odo to sort out, and he calls us back. Deep Space Nine also apparently having one of these new-fangled holographic phones. It's a Breen nursery rhyme, and he's ran it through the computer for hidden meanings without result. Odo has another idea, though, as some time back Eddington told him the best place to hide a secret is out in the open. He thinks the Breen themselves are the message, and there's a Breen colony near the demilitarized zone. The habitat of a sub-zero species would make a logical place to store the toxins that our story has now decided need refrigeration. Handily, we've some probes over in that direction, and upon checking, they logged something distinctly marquee-shaped passing through. It's gone now, but we got the direction it's going, and that gives us 2 potential targets for Eddington's next poison cloud. One of them would make for a much easier target, so Sisko chooses the other, as he thinks that's Eddington's MO. We get there ever so slightly after Eddington has fired his death fart at the colony. We still have 2 Marquis ships scarpering though, so we pursue. Kabooming one of them causes the other to turn around and head back to the planet. The Defiant might be too much for them, even in its jury-rigged state, but the transport ships evacuating Cardigans are an easier target. Pooping ensues and one of them is disabled, but not destroyed, and starts to re-enter the atmosphere. Kira says we can't teleport the civilians off the ship because we're out of range, presumably because somebody on the writing team forgot about mentioning those were broken earlier, but bugger that because Eddington's holo calling us. Disabling the transport was deliberate, as now we can either chase and catch him on the other Marquis ship, or save the civilians that he's just put on a collision course with the floor. That's not much of a choice, so Eddington legs it while Sisko turns around to grab the transport ship in a tractor beam. Time for a rethink then, and Sisko's reading the book Eddington sent over, not because he thinks the judgment is accurate, but because Eddington said it was one of his favourites, and that's an insight into his mind. It's the bread thief, not the obsessive copper, who's the subject of the book, says Sisko, a selfless Robin Hood type, and he thinks that's how Eddington sees himself, all of which might prove handy if Eddington truly wants to be the sort of melodramatic hero whose story ends in a noble sacrifice. You can't have a sacrifice without a villain, though, so Sisko tells Worf to turn some fireworks into poison bombs of our own and head for the nearest Marquis colony. He also sends out a signal saying that 1 hour from now, he'll fart poison onto the planet that's toxic to humans. 1 hour later, and nobody on the planet seems to be taking him seriously. Eddington gives us a tinkle on the holophone to call Sisko's bluff as well, which is when Sisko pulls the trigger. As the inhabitants start to evacuate, Eddington's apoplectic. Sisko telling him he plans to do the same to every other Marquis colony doesn't help matters. As Sisko turns the villain act up to 11, Eddington offers to hand over his weapons if Sisko stops, and when that doesn't do it, finally adds himself to the bargain. All of this nonsense has left a lot of people homeless, so the plan is to stick those from planets Eddington poisoned on the one Sisko poisoned, and vice versa. I'm pretty sure that leaves the Cardigans down a whole planet, but nobody else has noticed, so let's keep quiet about it. A victorious Sisko arrives home and leads Eddington into the hands of Odo, who does a great job of hiding how much he loves the irony. Dax asks if Sisko ran his plan past Starfleet Command before poisoning a whole planet, which, of course, he hadn't, so we'll leave them all to decide how they're going to spin the publicity on one of their own doing a bit of the old terrorism until the next adventure. Look, I know I said we were going to ignore the holographic communicator business, but Am I the only one who thinks this particular contrivance to have Eddington be on the same stage sticks out like a sore thumb? And for what? It's all the same to somebody at home watching it on a screen anyway. I can understand the logic behind it, that desire to have Ken Marshall be more present, but we've had a way around this countless times before. Switching between the viewpoints of both participants in a call already lets us see them in greater detail than on a screen and has worked perfectly fine up to now. This was change for the sake of change, one that comes out of nowhere, and the obvious nature of it all undermines any frankly questionable gain. And that's before we even start talking about the logistics of deciding to turn over floor space on the Defiant, a ship whose defining feature is not enough room to swing a cat, to a dedicated chinwag machine. Or why this particular advancement is both so important that a terrorist group would consider it worth nicking, yet so disposable that they'll stick it in Eddington's personal ship to fuck about with. Or even the basic logical stuff, like why everybody on the other end of the phone is standing while Sisko sits. As we're starting with the negatives, let's talk about all that technobabble filler as well. It was intended to make things sound more like contemporary naval combat, but the end result was whole swathes of dialogue that simply didn't matter. You can afford to do that in a feature film because you have the space to spread things out. Deep Space Nine gets 44.5 minutes to do the job, including the titles, so pissing it away on window dressing more than once feels wasteful. Oh, and fuck some of the camera work while we're at it as well. The scene where we're discussing the potential targets for Eddington's second attack are all over the place. I don't know if that was a particularly difficult filming area of the Defiant set, one with a reputation for being cramped, or a deliberate effect to try and add tension, but if it was the latter, the juxtaposition against the professional work in the rest of the episode completely undermines the premise and makes it look like what it is, somebody waving the camera about like a bloody feather duster. There are plot issues too. Sisko's plan to poison a planet with trilithium makes it uninhabitable to humans. Okay, cool. One problem though. Humans are only one part of the Maquis, an organisation we've also seen include Vulcans, Bolians, Klingons, Bajorans, Betazoids, and, if we're being particularly pedantic, technically at least one Cardigan as well. The point is that rendering Maquis planets uninhabitable to humans does not render them uninhabitable to the Maquis, because the Maquis is not a species. And that's another thing. When did we start having Maquis planets? It's the first example of the term as far as I can tell. I presume the real reason is to give Sisko a planet he can target without it being a Federation world, which would be a step too far even for this story, but it's out of nowhere. Are we saying the Maquis, an organisation which survives through stealth, has decided to consolidate themselves by settling on new, dedicated planets and advertised those planets sufficiently that Sisko already knows where they all live? Or are we saying Federation worlds have officially seceded, an event about which we've heard nothing, and one that would have absolved the Federation of any responsibility for their actions? You could argue a more public presence makes an element of sense now the Cardigans are too busy to do anything about it, but Starfleet are still officially after them, as evidenced by Sisko chasing Eddington. Creating whole worlds that are officially affiliated with an organisation that's still attacking Federation members, something that happens in this episode with the piracy of 2 Bolian freighters, is a questionable choice at best. Taken in concert, you'd be fair to conclude that I think there are a few problems with this one. It's doubly impressive, then, that it still manages to be good. We have a stated position on this channel that says a frankly obscene amount of things can be forgiven if the main hook of the story is up to scratch, and seeing the dual approaches of Sisko and Eddington is sufficient hook to overlook the issues. When you boil it down, we're shown one man who sacrificed the job for his ethics and one who sacrificed his ethics for the job. That both end up doing global terrorism could perhaps be considered immoral on following any course of action to extremes. Both agree that the suffering of civilians is wrong, and both make civilians suffer in the pursuit of their goals. Their respective positions are unlikely to matter to the thousands of people affected by their pissing competition. "I fucked you over for the morally superior reason" is an excuse unlikely to carry any water for those on the receiving end. Neither of these people are heroes in this episode, Eddington starts out with killing a man slowly by marooning him, and that's just the appetizer. The Malinche took casualties. How many were serious? How many fatal? Eddington may not have been there, but he ordered it. He took a far more personal hand in attacking the Cardigan transport, though. A ship rammed with civilians fired upon enough to fully disable it. How likely is that to have been bloodless? How many unarmed colonists did he kill to save himself? And that's assuming there were enough spaces on the transports to evacuate everyone, which is, frankly, optimistic. The likely result of Eddington's actions is a significant loss of life. Does that make Sisko's actions acceptable? Of course not. He should have been court-martialed. Collective punishment is a war crime even in our time, so the idea it would have been fine for him is absurd. Attacking a civilian population, regardless of their stated affiliation, which we've already established is nebulous at best, by the way, is flat-out wrong. Wrong is not the same as a plot hole, though. There are those who consider this episode unbelievable, and I can only assume those people are ignoring how Starfleet Command has viewed the entirety of the DMZ situation from the beginning. That they'd ignore questionable actions which restore the status quo is entirely in keeping with their actions to date. Every admiral involved has just wanted this whole thing to go away, and Sisko made that happen. As far as they're concerned, the rest is just details. It's not like they're opposed to a bit of plausible deniability, something we saw in practice when they unofficially wished good luck to the Cardigan Romulan fleet that went off to do a bit of genocide on the Founders. No, Sisko's actions here were wrong, but I can absolutely believe that Starfleet would make the consequences go away. So where does all that leave us? Well, down in the trenches again, amongst the filth, that place where Deep Space Nine truly excels. There's nothing noble here, just two people who do bad shit in order to correct other bad shit. Uprooting people is completely wrong, so I'm going to uproot some people, you know, for justice. It's not the first time the line between villain and hero has been as thin as the fabric of a uniform. Oh, and one last thing. It's been a little while, but we have another entry into the Babylon 5 crossover club with Captain Charlie Cannon Fodder. Eric Pierpoint here played a lad called Daniel in the Season 4 finale, in a scene that could be generously described as paying homage to George Orwell's 1984. End of episode.
I honestly didn't know it would be that bad. I genuinely had no idea.
You complete bastard.
I swear to you, I thought they were exaggerating.
Oh, I feel like some bugger's trying to drill through me skull.
I thought that because dogs don't really see red, the monochrome screen would be less of a strain on your eyes.
So that's why I had to squint outside in time, is it?
Ah. Oh dear.
I think I'm gonna choke.
On the plus side, I think we've finally answered a serious question from our time.
Oh God, I'm dying.
I think we've figured out what the guy who designed the holodeck safeties based his idea of a good user experience on. Woof.